talks about AI like this one and conversations like the one we're going to have, I like to pose the question, and I invite the audience to reflect on this question on your own as well. I think AI is. If you were to fill in the blank with a word or a few words in response to that, what comes to mind?
I can start.
Sure.
First of all, good morning, everybody. I want to say that Claudia's research I love it. It's so fascinating, and it truly validates my own experience in a newsroom in Pittsburgh over the last 25 years. It's really, truly fascinating. I think you can write a book about it, really, if you're not already. But anyway, to answer your question, Sarah, AI, I don't think about it as either friend or enemy, but I think is the word frenemy something that we can think of as providing some tools that in newsrooms can be useful. You know, for example, help with writing headlines or photo captions, that sort of thing. But what gives me pause, and I say that not lightly, because sometimes I just get really scared of some of the things I see, like some of the things you talked about, is the fact that AI has truly a lack of humanity. In a world in which we are so dependent on facts, we are dependent on, accuracy, true, honest, real information. And I'm not sure that AI can capture the human emotion. And I'll give you an example real quick. In Pittsburgh, we covered several years ago a huge tragedy at the Tree of Life synagogue in Squirrel Hill, in which 11 people were killed. A lot of our journalists were out in the field interviewing, witnesses and families of the victims, etc. And I think to myself, the emotion that we, as journalists, were able to capture in those interactions face to face with those people, that's not something that an AI chatbot can do, So in many ways, that's why I feel such a sense of, it gives me a lot of pause when I think about AI, because while I see the possibilities, in making our work a lot more efficient and quick so that we can focus on things that are important to journalists, like investigative reporting and so on. It also strips our work of truly a component that's very important, like, the humanity that I speak about.
Absolutely. Claudia, what about you?
When I think AI, one of the first things that comes to mind is this argument that some of my former colleagues, Arvind Narayanan and Sayesh Kapoor, made in their book AI Snake Oil. If any of you guys have read that, highly recommend. They start the book by talking about how AI is such a broad term. It's as though we use the word vehicle when we talked about any sort of transportation issue. So imagine if you and I were talking about very different things, but you were talking about a stroller and I was talking about a submarine, but we were both using the word AI. I feel like that clouds the conversation, and I think in journalism, as in many industries, there are many kinds of applications of AI across, news creation, news distribution, all elements of the pipeline, and those are all different tools. It could be machine learning, it could be chatbots, it could be other things, and I think it's really important to use precise language when we talk about AI, because I think you can't paint with a broad brush.
Absolutely. My answer to the question is I think AI is a tool, and something that you both touched on that kind of ties into why I answer that question that way is let's not give it more credit than it deserves. It does lack that humanity. There are so many layers to it that require our intentional use of it, mindfulness, continuing education. And so that's one of the things I'm looking forward to digging in more here in the next few minutes is, how is this a tool? How can we continue to learn more about how it is a friend or a foe so that we can stay in control of it so it doesn't control us? Which really leads me to my next question. I'm going to start off with you here, Luis. Claudia shared a lot of really insightful research about the rise of zero-click searches. As the editor of the top news site here in Western Pennsylvania, how are you seeing the impact of AI integrated into search for triblive.com?
That's a great question, and I urge all of you to think about the ways in which you consume news. I do too. I Google something, and I then kind of read the first thing that comes on my phone, and then I keep going. But what I want you to do is I want you to click on the original source, which would be the article on TribLive, which is not happening as often as we would like. So to your question, yes, it is affecting our traffic because we're lazy as news consumers and we're busy and we have things to do. And when we want to find out something, we just look at Google and keep going, right? So, but I can tell you that in our newsroom, we employ probably close to 100 journalists, and we pay probably $7 million in salaries every year. And Google is giving our company probably, I don't know, $150,000 a year. So there's obviously a discrepancy there. We, as journalists, we are the ones who are going to school board meetings and municipal meetings and events and fires and breaking news stories. You don't see AI chatbots at those events, right? So here we are paying for all of that, the work to get the news into your devices, yet Google is benefiting from it. So it's a huge effect on our work, for sure.
Claudia had also mentioned about how that drop in web traffic can also translate to other aspects of the business model, including advertising. Is that something that you find Trib Total Media grappling with as well because of AI?
It is. I wouldn't really necessarily think that it's because of AI. We have embraced a model in which we have no paywall on TribLive, and that's been intentional. We want to make sure that people in Western Pennsylvania and elsewhere around the country have access to news from Pittsburgh and the general area, so we don't charge. So instead, but that doesn't mean that traffic doesn't affect advertising. Of course it does. And that's a challenge for us because, the advertising revenue has decreased over the years. If you recall, those of you who may be old enough to remember what the Sunday papers used to look like years ago, they were kind of thick and they were filled with like flyers for Kaufman's and Rite Aid and CVS. And now you pick up a copy of the paper and it's super thin. There are no ads. And, it's definitely making a dent in the revenue stream for our publications.
Claudia, Luis's observations of the impact of AI on his newsroom, it sounds like that's aligning with what your research is showing as well. Is there anything else that you're seeing that perhaps Luis hasn't touched on?
Yeah, a lot of publishers are seeing this. In particular, I think smaller publishers and local news outlets have been reporting drops in traffic. And I think in part it's because one of the stats that I shared is it seems that the publishers who are benefiting most from AI search are the ones who are able to get these very lucrative, and they're not even lucrative financially, but they're lucrative in terms of exposure deals with AI companies. And though like OpenAI and Perplexity are not coming to TribLive, and they're not coming to a lot of outlets that don't have like international attention already, because those matter less from a policy perspective, because I think AI companies are just trying to tamp down the publishers that would make the most noise if they weren't being compensated.
I want to add something. I don't think this is all necessarily bad in the sense that it's motivated us or prompted us or challenged us to really pay attention to the content that we're creating, because we got to take a little bit of that sort of fault, not necessarily just blame AI for everything, for the drops in traffic. We want to make sure that what we're producing, the content that we have, is what you guys want to read, right? And you guys will be super surprised at what people actually come to our site for. Sports is huge here in Western Pennsylvania, breaking news, and that sort of thing. So we have embraced a model in which we are looking at web traffic in real time, which is not something we did, decades ago. We're constantly evaluating if people are reading us, if they're clicking our articles, because if you're not looking at it, it can be great, but why am I going to, place all these resources and send journalists to cover certain events if people really don't care to read it? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that topic, are there any other positives or benefits, Luis, that you're finding that AI is maybe bringing to the newsroom?
As I mentioned earlier, we are actually testing tools that help our, editors create better headlines. Uh, you know, Journalists sometimes can be great writers, but not necessarily great headline writers. And there are some definite AI tools that I've used actually that actually help, find the right verb, the right focus. There are also tools that help our photographers who are also not great writers write more compelling photo captions. But all of that has to be fact checked. So you can really rely on the AI tool to maybe get you started. It doesn't mean that you can avoid the human sort of interaction with the copy and the story.
Sure, it's a thought partner versus
As you called
absolutely
it, a
not a
tool,
replacement.
of
Yeah,
course. Yeah.
yeah. Claudia, in your research, are there any other benefits you're finding that AI might be bringing to newsrooms?
I work at a journalism school, and one of the big focuses among some of my colleagues are data journalism. And so I think a lot of data journalists have been using what we now call AI, what used to be called machine learning, for a decade plus. And I think some of the most useful uses of AI are very unsexy, and it's just like allowing people to crunch a huge amount of data that they wouldn't have been able to do manually.
Yeah, absolutely. Even in my own work, I'm seeing it valuable for those types of reasons. Also, as an educator, I find for students, sometimes if they do their due diligence to check the links, it might bring to their attention a source or a news site they hadn't considered before. Of course, as you mentioned, Claudia, assuming that what it's linking to is accurate. And interestingly enough, in the PR world, I have been seeing in my strategic communication work a renewed discussion around the importance of companies and clients trying to build relationships with newsrooms, because their kind of working theory is, in addition to publishing content on our own social media platforms or company websites, if we try to increase our ability to maybe get covered by a news outlet, maybe that will help us pop up in that AI overview. And so, for what that's worth, I do feel like putting my PR hat on for a moment, there is a renewed discussion of like, we need to be mindful of building meaningful relationships with news outlets. So for what that's worth, we'll see if there's any other benefits that come to light. But one other thing I want to touch on, Luis, when you were talking about, possible solutions or just ways of trying to adapt in light of AI. Claudia, you raised some really good points in your presentation about publishers being at this turning point of, do we adapt? Do we push back? What do we do? Do we make a deal? And so, Luis, my question here for you is, what is Tribble Hive striving to do? Or are you thinking about pushing back, adapting? It sounds like you're already thinking about adapting, but yeah, how do you respond to this?
Honestly, we have to embrace, the tech sector as potential partners and try and really, we've tried to invite them to the table to negotiate with us fair pricing. I think that's super important. So to that end, many publishers have banded together to create legislation that would force, giants such as Google to negotiate, pricing with publishers that are supplying them with all this great information that they're spreading on their sites. So that's one aspect of it that I think may be a little bit difficult, as legislation is not easy to get through in Washington, and there's been several hearings, and we've been successful in at least trying to create awareness and generate, all the stuff that you're talking about, we may be familiar with it, but I don't think the general public really understands it. They don't understand what the stakes are in terms of, what it means to journalists, working journalists like myself, where, these tools, while they can be useful, they can really threaten livelihoods, people's jobs, and that's super important to me when I oversee a department of dozens of journalists. And even more, I think it's important in this day and age to keep in mind that we have to make sure that we're providing information that people can trust. Trust is huge. And I'm not sure that I can think of AI and trust in the same sentence, and I think that's a problem. So I do believe that we have a responsibility to make sure that you as news consumers continue to trust us despite the fact that all these sort of negative tools are entering our world.
Yeah. Claudia, in your presentation, you touched on some of the ways that publishers are pushing back and adapting, but it sounds like even the ones that do involve trying to make a deal with a company like OpenAI or put up a paywall or something, that they're flawed too. So are there any real tangible solutions here?
Yeah, that's extremely complicated, and I don't envy the people who are in the position of figuring that out, because it seems like the options that are presented to publishers are very flimsy. So the robot exclusion protocol, which is the thing I talked about that allows publishers to add code to their website to determine whether or not a crawler can access it, it's just a handshake agreement. And AI companies are not necessarily incentivized. There's no penalty for ignoring that. And so one possible approach is maybe enshrining that in law. I don't know if that's the right solution. But I think another piece of it is just like recognizing the labor of the journalists who do the work that enable the chatbots to actually produce content. And I think there's a total lack of recognition on the part of the AI companies, but I think also if you're a user who's being presented that summary, there's not signals in the summary that encourage you to think about where that information came from.
Yeah, no, something that you both just touched on that leads to where I want to go next with our conversation is what can we do? So there's layers to this. Of course, there's, how's the newsroom adapting? There's maybe education happening with our, maybe our lawmakers, potential legislation, hopefully trying to get the tech companies to be mindful and honor these agreements. But beyond all of that, what can everyday people do to strive to maybe be part of the solution and support local journalism?
Go straight to the source. So instead of being lazy and using the AI summary, try to scroll down a little bit. It doesn't really take that much time, and then go straight to the news outlet that's providing the information. That's really truly going to give you the best information anyway. So why wouldn't you want to do that? So, I mean, and I think we've tried to sort of create campaigns to encourage people to do just that, to make sure that they're coming to us directly, whether it's by via an app, that sort of thing, or just educating them about coming straight to our website, which is, again, like I said, it's not an easy thing to do, right, Claudia? Because people are just more predisposed to go to just read the summary and move forward. Now, we're also trying to test creating summaries ourselves. Not a big fan of that, but at the same time, we've discovered that people do like to read news and bullet points for whatever reason. If it's something that they don't know about, it's quicker, it's faster. I'm a purist. I like to, read traditional, journalism stories. But that's another, thing that we're sort of testing, doing our own summaries and putting them on top of the stories, so that when you come directly to the site, then at least you'll get, that format that you're getting used to.
Yeah, Claudia, any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to clarify, and something that I'm grappling with, is I don't necessarily think it's bad that the way that people are accessing information is changing. The way people access information is constantly changing, and the fact that AI summaries are filling a need shows that that is useful to people. And I don't think it's fair to blame people for using that. I'm inundated with information all the time, and if I just want like a quick answer about like whether or not like the bug I see is a tick or not, and if there's like an AI summary about it, I don't necessarily think that I need to become a scholar of ticks and like understand everything. But on the other hand, I do think so I don't think the fact that the way people access information is changing is bad. But I do think that there should be pressure on AI companies to ensure that the information is more accurate, because there isn't any sort of laws around this, and there's no accountability around whether or not the summary is accurate or not, whether the citation is a plagiarize, or all those sorts of things. So I think that is a thing that maybe common people should be pushing maybe their legislators to
You know,
change.
frankly, ultimately, it's on you as a news consumer to make sure that you're, consuming information that is true and accurate. So, I mean, those summaries, we all should approach them with caution. Proceed with caution when you're looking at the summaries, because you really honestly don't know if the information is accurate or not.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of when Wikipedia became a thing. I remember in school, they're like, don't cite Wikipedia. But I do think that Wikipedia can be a valuable jumping off point to then find like additional sources that you go and read yourself. And so perhaps we approach these AI overviews with that mentality that, it's good for a quick reference if we are trying to verify an insect. But if we want to do a deeper dive, use it as a jumping off point to go click on the links and read the full stories, as you said, Luis. I want to look ahead to the future now. Where do we see maybe all of this going? And Claudia, I'm going to turn to you. Any insights on the horizon based on your research?
One emerging debate that I've seen among publishers is whether or not to make their content more machine readable. So to optimize the way that they present their content. In the past, this was SEO, search engine optimization. Now there's talk of GEO, or there's a lot of different acronyms that people are using. But basically, if AI search is the thing, how do we make sure we show up in AI search? And there's talk also of maybe like creating two different versions of your content, one that is human readable and one that is machine readable, so that you're optimizing for both experiences. And so that's one possible path we're going down.
Luis, what about you?
Oh boy, my mother-in-law always is one who says, "Well, I read it in the internet, so it must be true, right?" But I do have a lot of faith in the news consumer, in people who are reaching for truth and who are smart about how they consume the information they get. I don't know where the future is going to take us. I do have faith that there will be AI tools that will be really useful in making our work a lot more efficient, and will free our journalists to work on meaningful stories and spend more time, doing research, talking to people, doing investigative work, holding organizations and government accountable. So there's always room for that, and I think AI will free up our time to do more of that. As Claudia said, I think the ability of some AI tools to do data crunches, I think it's huge. I've done a lot of investigative work in which I have to look at sets of Excel spreadsheets, and I can see a world in which our time crunching all that data will be minimized in a way that will free our time to do more meaningful work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's interesting, Claudia. In my work, I'm seeing that kind of attention to trying to adapt content to machines happening as well. I have a client who recently launched a blog with the intention of trying to create content that could perhaps be picked up in AI overview because they are noticing a decline in traffic to their website, and they're trying to craft that content in a way that's mimicking kind of that bullet point, kind of Q&A format, and those summaries that you mentioned that, Trib Live is being mindful of as well. Before we move into Q&A with the audience, any final thoughts from Luis or Claudia? Anything we haven't touched on already that you'd like to share with the audience?
I just encourage you all to, like I said, go to straight to the source of the news. Be wary, be mindful that AI can be a friend, but it can also be a foe.
Yeah, what he said.
I agree.